The Galactic Confederation had standards. High standards. Absurdly, mathematically precise, bureaucratically excessive standards that would make even the most obsessive-compulsive Earth accountant throw their calculator out the window in despair. And nowhere were these standards more rigorously enforced than at the Interstellar Academy of Advanced Species Integration, or as everyone called it, the Snob Box. Candidate 7293E, species designation, human, origin, Earth, Sol system, Orion Cygnus arm, aptitude level, pending evaluation. The mechanical voice droned through the enormous crystal dome of the arrival terminal. Quinn Novak stepped off the quantum shuttle, legs wobbling slightly from the 16-dimensional travel sickness that even the best anti-nausea pills couldn't quite handle. Just another charming side effect of being what the Confederation classified as a Category 4 emerging intelligence, which was diplomatic alien speak for still basically monkeys with smartphones. "That's me," Quinn called out, raising a hand. The human. The assembled faculty of the Academy collectively shifted their eye stalks, tentacles, and various sensory appendages in what Quinn had learned was the universal gesture for uncomfortable disdain, like watching someone pick their nose in public, but across 17 species simultaneously. Dean Krasil, a towering blue-skinned academic, whose species evolved from something like squid crossed with giraffes, glided forward with the smooth superiority of someone who had been born, raised, and thoroughly pickled in his own self-importance. A human, at the Academy. Krasil's voice modulator barely concealed his disgust as 3 of his eye stalks performed independent eye rolls. The council must be growing desperate for diplomatic gestures. Professor Vex 4, a robotic entity who had downloaded herself into so many upgraded bodies that her original species was now just an interesting footnote in her personnel file, hummed forward. Her chrome-plated chassis gleamed under the 7 suns visible through the dome. "According to our pre-screening, this specimen shouldn't have made it past the application algorithm," she announced, scanning Quinn with a beam that made the human's fillings tingle. "Probability of graduation success, 0.0034%. Hardly worth the paperwork when it fails." Quinn adjusted the single duffel bag containing everything Earth's ambassadors had deemed necessary for interspecies dignity maintenance, mostly deodorant and breath mints. "Hey, I'm standing right here," Quinn said, forcing a smile. "And I scored in the 98th percentile on the entrance exam." "Yes," Professor Vex 4 replied, her voice modulator flat. 98th percentile, for humans, which ranks somewhere between the intelligence of our cafeteria's dishwashing system and the decorative quantum fungi that grow in the meditation gardens. The gathered first-year students representing the 27 most advanced civilizations in the known galaxy rippled with the alien equivalent of chuckles, some literally rippled, being semi-aquatic lifeforms contained in hovering water spheres. According to Statute 5591b, Krasil pontificated, floating data files materializing around his elongated head, "We are obligated to offer this human the standard orientation and placement assessment, despite the obvious outcome." 2 of his facial tentacles twisted into what might have been a condescending smirk. Quinn straightened up, shoulders back, channeling every underdog sports movie ever made. "I'm ready for whatever tests you've got." "Of course you are," Dean Krasil said, in the same tone someone might use to compliment a child's crayon drawing of a nuclear physics equation. "Professor Vex 4 will handle your placement assessment. I expect we'll have you cataloged and assigned to remedial studies by dinner." The faculty drifted away like an academic fog, leaving Quinn alone with the mechanical professor, whose optical sensors were clearly calculating the likelihood of Quinn breaking something expensive within the next 10 minutes. "Follow me, human," Vex 4 instructed, "and please refrain from touching anything that glows, hovers, or appears to be thinking." Quinn nodded, clutching the duffel bag like a shield. "Got it, no touching the smart stuff." "Precisely," Vex 4 replied, "although to be fair, that encompasses approximately 97% of the Academy." Quinn gazed up at the twisting architecture of the Snob Box, impossible spires of living crystal, hallways that bent through dimensions humans couldn't even name, and somewhere in this maze of advanced civilization, a bed that hopefully wouldn't analyze and critique Quinn's primitive sleep patterns. The Interstellar Academy of Advanced Species Integration had welcomed its first human, welcome being a term used extraordinarily loosely, like calling a dental drill a mouth massager. But humanity needed this foothold among the stars, and Quinn Novak, with a mixture of luck, bravado, and what Earth's selection committee called pathological optimism, was now carrying the torch for the entire species. No pressure or anything. The placement assessment chamber resembled what might happen if an MRI machine mated with a kaleidoscope and then went to graduate school for experimental physics. Quinn stood in the center of the swirling holographic displays while Professor Vex-4's sensors performed what felt like an invasive inventory of every cell in the human's body. Interesting, the professor hummed. Your neural pathways show unusual patterns for such a primitive cerebral architecture. Thanks, Quinn ventured. I did a lot of crossword puzzles as a kid. Charming, Vex-4 replied without inflection. Your results are anomalous. You display an aptitude for quantum neural interfaces that exceeds your species' baseline by several standard deviations. Quinn brightened. That's good, right? It means you're a statistical outlier among a statistically irrelevant species, Vex-4 clarified. Like finding a particularly tall bacterium. The assessment chamber doors hissed open, revealing Dean Krasil flanked by two other faculty members whose species Quinn couldn't even begin to identify. One appeared to be composed entirely of geometric shapes that shouldn't be able to exist in three-dimensional space, and the other seemed to be wearing its internal organs as external fashion accessories. The results? Krasil demanded, his central eye stalk swiveling impatiently. Vex-4's display screen flickered. The human shows unexpected compatibility with Class 7 neural technologies, specifically, quantum neural piloting systems. The Dean's color shifted from blue to a mottled purple, which Quinn assumed was either surprise or indigestion. Impossible. Their species barely understands how to keep their planetary atmosphere from cooking them alive. Nevertheless, Vex-4 responded, the data is conclusive. The faculty member composed of impossible shapes vibrated in what might have been laughter. This should be entertaining. Assign the human to my quantum neural piloting course. Professor Zenith, the dean protested. That's our most advanced piloting curriculum. Even our brightest students require a decade of study to achieve basic competency. Precisely, Professor Zenith's shapes reconfigured themselves into what might have been a smile, if smiles could violate the laws of Euclidean geometry. The council insists we give humans a fair chance. What could be fairer than offering this specimen our most challenging course? When it fails, as it inevitably will, we'll have empirical proof that humans aren't ready for galactic integration. Quinn cleared their throat. Again, standing right here. Yes, we're all painfully aware of your presence. Dean Krasil sighed, his tentacles drooping in resignation. Very well, human Quinn Novak, you are hereby assigned to advanced quantum neural piloting under Professor Zenith. You will have 3 standard galactic months to demonstrate basic competency or face expulsion. 3 months. Professor Zenith's shapes contracted sharply. That's absurdly generous. No sentient has ever mastered the basics in less than 8 years. The Council's integration protocols are quite specific, Krasil replied smugly. We must allow a minimum adjustment period of 3 standard months before formal evaluation. Quinn did some quick mental math. 3 galactic months translated to roughly 90 Earth days. Not ideal, but not impossible either. Maybe. I accept the challenge, Quinn announced, trying to project confidence while inwardly wondering if it was too late to apply for that barista job back in Seattle. How brave, commented the organ-wearing faculty member in a voice like wind chimes made of wet tissue. Like watching a single-celled organism declare war on mathematics. Quinn was escorted to the dormitory sector, a honeycomb of pods designed to accommodate the biological needs of dozens of species. The assignment algorithm had apparently struggled with where to put the human, eventually settling on a shared chamber with one of the few species that wouldn't accidentally poison, crush, or phase Quinn out of existence while sleeping. You must be the human, chirped a voice as Quinn entered the assigned pod. A small fuzzy creature with enormous ears and 6 limbs dangled from the ceiling. I'm Meepo, tertiary specialist in comparative xenobiology with a focus on emergent intelligences. I'm Quinn, came the cautious reply. Tertiary specialist in not knowing what any of that means. Meepo dropped from the ceiling with surprising grace. Up close, he resembled a cross between a lemur and a spider, with intelligent eyes that blinked in different patterns. We're roommates. How exciting. I've never observed a human up close before. Is it true you only have one heart? How inefficient. Meepo bounced excitedly. And you're in quantum neural piloting, with Professor Zenith. Oh dear. That bad, huh? Bad. No, impossible. Yes, absolutely. Meepo's fur rippled in sympathy. No offense, but your species hasn't even developed basic telepathy yet. Quantum neural interfaces require manipulating 16 dimensions of consciousness simultaneously. Quinn dropped the duffel bag onto what appeared to be the designated human sleeping platform. Great, so I'm set up to fail, spectacularly, Meepo agreed cheerfully. Then, noting Quinn's expression, added, oh, that's not a good thing for humans, is it? My cultural sensitivity training indicated your species dislikes public failure almost as much as you fear being eaten by large predators. Something like that, Quinn muttered. The dormitory door slid open again, revealing a tall reptilian student with scales that shifted color like oil on water. His uniform bore the insignia of the Draconian elite, a species known for their superiority complex and anatomically improbable number of teeth. "So it's true," the newcomer hissed, fixing Quinn with vertically slitted eyes. "They've let a human into the academy." "Drakthor," Meepo squeaked, shrinking back. "We weren't expecting visitors." "I'm not visiting," Drakthor sneered, revealing those aforementioned teeth. "I'm warning, the human doesn't belong here. This institution has maintained its prestige for 12 millennia. We won't allow it to become a charity case for cosmic primitives." Quinn stood up, fixing the reptilian with a level stare. "Thanks for the welcome wagon. I'll be sure to include you in my Yelp review." Drakthor's scales flashed crimson. "You won't last a week in Zenith's class. Quantum neural piloting has broken students from civilizations 10,000 years more advanced than yours." "Then I guess I'd better start studying," Quinn replied. After Drakthor stormed out, Meepo emerged from under a piece of furniture that defied description. "You stood up to Drakthor," the small alien marveled. "Either you're very brave or you don't understand how easily his species can dislocate their jaws to swallow prey whole." Quinn sat heavily on the edge of the bed. "Meepo, level with me. What happens if when I fail this class?" The furry alien's ears drooped. "According to the integration treaties, if the first human candidate fails to meet minimum standards, Earth will be ineligible to send another representative for one full standard century." Quinn felt the weight of 8 billion humans suddenly pressing down on those already burdened shoulders. "So no pressure," Meepo added helpfully. "Just the future of your entire species' galactic standing." Quinn stared out the window at the swirling cosmic nebula beyond the Academy's artificial atmosphere. Somewhere out there was Earth, blissfully unaware that its galactic reputation now rested on whether one human could learn in 3 months what took other species 10 years to master. "One thing at a time," Quinn murmured. "First day of school tomorrow, how hard could it be?" Meepo made a sound that might have been a laugh, a hiccup, or possibly a small death rattle. "That's the spirit," the alien chirped. "Delusional optimism is one of your species' most endearing traits." The quantum neural piloting lab resembled what might happen if NASA Mission Control had a baby with a Buddhist temple, then sent that baby to live with circus contortionists. The Earth control interfaces floated in midair, pulsing with colors humans had no names for. Students sat in meditation postures, their consciousness projected into quantum simulators where the laws of physics were more like loose suggestions. Professor Zenith's geometric form shifted impatiently as Quinn entered the lab. "You're precisely on time, human. How disappointingly predictable. Should I have been early? Late? Arrived yesterday?" Quinn asked, genuinely confused. "A true quantum neural pilot exists in a superposition of temporal states," explained a jellyfish-like student floating in a gravity bubble nearby. "I arrived both 10 minutes ago and will arrive 14 minutes from now." "Right," Quinn nodded. "I'll work on that." Professor Zenith's shapes condensed into what might have been a lectern. "Today we begin phase 1 of neural expansion. Each student will attempt to project their consciousness into the quantum field while maintaining awareness of at least 8-dimensional axes simultaneously." The other students, 12 of them representing the galaxy's most advanced species, settled into their interface pods with practiced ease. Quinn approached the remaining pod cautiously. It resembled an egg-shaped throne made of living crystal that pulsed in rhythm with some unheard music. Do I just sit in it?" Quinn asked. Drakthor, already half-merged with his pod, let out a hissing laugh. "The human doesn't even know how to merge with basic quantum tech. This will be more pathetic than I imagined." Professor Zenith's shapes twisted in what might have been exasperation. "Apply your neural contact points to the interface nodes, obviously." Quinn looked at the smooth crystal surface. "What neural contact points?" "The ones that every evolved species develops during adolescence," Zenith replied, as if explaining to a particularly dim toddler why water is wet. Meepo, who was in the introductory class next door but had snuck over to watch the impending disaster, scurried up to Quinn. "Humans don't have external neural contact points, Professor. Their brains are entirely contained within their calcium-based protective shells." Zenith's geometric form shuddered with what might have been discussed. "Primitives. Fine, use the adaptive interface headset." From a storage compartment emerged what looked like a crown made of liquid metal and blinking lights. Quinn carefully placed it on their head, wincing as it adjusted itself, tiny filaments seeking contact with the skin. "Now sit in the pod and clear your mind," Zenith instructed, "if you have one." Quinn settled into the pod, which hummed and adjusted to accommodate human physiology with obvious reluctance. The headset grew warm, and suddenly the lab vanished from view. Quinn found themselves floating in a void filled with mathematical equations that looked like living creatures, swimming through concepts rather than water. Colors with texture, sounds with flavor, ideas with weight. The quantum field was sensory overload on a cosmic scale. "Hello?" Quinn called out, voice echoing strangely. "What am I supposed to?" And then reality fractured into 16 different directions simultaneously. Quinn's consciousness was pulled apart like taffy being stretched across the universe, each strand trying to perceive a different dimension of reality that human brains were never designed to process. The sensation lasted approximately 3 seconds before Quinn's mind rejected the entire experience and slammed back into the physical body with the approximate force of a mental baseball bat to the frontal lobe. "AAR!" Quinn screamed, tumbling out of the pod onto the laboratory floor. "What the actual?" 11.4 seconds, Professor Zenith announced. "A new record for neural rejection. Even the semi-sentient fungal colonies we tested last semester lasted 15 seconds before their consciousness collapsed." The class tittered with the interspecies equivalent of laughter. Drakthar's scales rippled with smug satisfaction. "I wasn't ready," Quinn gasped, struggling to stand as the room kept insisting on spinning. "Let me try again." 5 attempts later, Quinn had managed to extend their quantum field endurance to a whopping 27 seconds, still light years away from the minimum 5 minutes required for basic interfacing, let alone actual piloting. "Fascinating," Zenith commented, recording the results. "The human's neural pathways physically reject multidimensional awareness. It's as if your species evolved specifically to avoid higher consciousness." "Not helping," Quinn muttered, fighting down a wave of nausea. As the class ended, Drakthar slithered past, deliberately bumping Quinn's shoulder. "I've taken the liberty of calculating how long it would take you to reach basic competency at your current rate of progress," he hissed. "Approximately 12,483 years. You might want to start looking into cryogenic preservation technology." Back in the dormitory, Quinn lay on the bed staring at the ceiling, which helpfully displayed a real-time visualization of how badly human neural patterns compared to the academy average. "I can't do this," Quinn admitted to Meepo, who was hanging upside down from a light fixture and snacking on something that looked distressingly like it might be alive. "My brain feels like it's been put through a blender and then reassembled by a drunk toddler." "That's actually an accurate description of quantum field exposure for unprepared neural systems," Meepo nodded, dropping another wriggling morsel into his mouth. "Your species simply lacks the evolutionary adaptations required for multidimensional awareness." Quinn sat up suddenly. "Wait. The interface is trying to force my brain to perceive all 16 dimensions simultaneously, right?" "Of course," Meepo replied. "That's how quantum neural piloting works. You need to perceive all dimensional axes at once to navigate quantum space-time." "But what if I didn't try to perceive them all at once?" Quinn mused. "What if I tried to, I don't know, build up to it gradually?" Meepo blinked his 6 eyes in sequence. "That's not how the system is designed to function." "Yeah, well, the system wasn't designed for humans," Quinn replied, a new determination forming. "Maybe I need to hack the interface." The next day Quinn arrived at the lab early, actually early, not quantum superposition early, and began examining the neural interface pod. Years of tinkering with computers back on Earth had taught Quinn that no system was unhackable if you were stubborn enough. "What are you doing?" demanded Professor Zenith, whose geometric forms materialized suddenly beside the pod. "I had an idea," Quinn explained, fingers dancing over the crystal interface. "The standard neural connection is trying to force my brain to process all 16 dimensions at once. But what if I reconfigured it to introduce each dimensional axis sequentially instead?" "Absurd," Zenith dismissed. "The quantum field cannot be parsed into linear components. It exists as a unified multidimensional matrix." "Maybe for your species," Quinn countered. "But humans are really good at breaking complicated things into smaller pieces. We call it reductionism. It's like our superpower." "Your superpower is an intellectual limitation, not an advantage," Zenith retorted, but curiosity had crept into their tone. As the other students filed in, Quinn continued working on the pod, reconfiguring its neural interface protocols. Drakthar observed with obvious disdain. "The primitive is tampering with academy technology," he announced loudly. "Perhaps it's trying to downgrade the system to match its evolutionary status." Quinn ignored him, making final adjustments as class began. This time, when sliding into the pod, there was a sense of cautious optimism. The headset engaged, and Quinn's consciousness expanded outward, but instead of the overwhelming 16-dimensional assault, there was only a gentle tug in a single direction. First dimension isolated, Quinn murmured, focusing on the strange new perceptual axis that stretched like a line through reality. Okay, not so bad, add the second. Gradually, Quinn added dimensional perceptions one by one, like slowly turning up different instruments in an orchestra, until they formed a coherent whole. By the time the class ended, Quinn had successfully navigated 7 dimensional axes, not even halfway to the required 16, but exponentially better than yesterday's results. Professor Zenith's shapes twisted in what might have been confusion, unorthodox. The interface was never designed to function in this sequential manner. Sometimes the instructions aren't written for everyone, Quinn replied, carefully extracting from the pod. Sometimes you have to rewrite them. That night, Quinn awoke to find the neural interface crown missing from their bedside table. A quick search revealed nothing, but a suspicious scale, iridescent and unmistakably draconian, lay on the floor near the door. Drakthar, Quinn muttered, should have seen that coming. Meepo stirred from his ceiling hammock. What's happening? Is it time for third sleep already? Sabotage is happening, Quinn replied. Apparently I'm doing well enough to be a threat. That's actually a compliment in a twisted way, Meepo observed, rubbing his eyes. What will you do now? Quinn stared out the window at the swirling cosmos beyond. Adapt. That's another thing humans are good at. When the rules don't work for us, we change the game. The next morning, Quinn arrived at the lab with a strange contraption cobbled together from spare parts, scrounged from around the academy. A makeshift neural interface that looked like it had been designed by a mad scientist with a drinking problem and questionable aesthetics. Professor Zenith's shapes contorted. What is that abomination? Plan B, Quinn replied with a grin. Or as we humans call it, innovation born from desperation. Quinn's homemade neural interface resembled a colander covered in fairy lights and what might have been chewing gum holding several components together. The class watched in horrified fascination as Quinn attached it to the quantum pod. This violates at least 17 Academy safety protocols. Professor Zenith protested, geometric shapes flickering anxiously. Probably more, Quinn agreed, making final adjustments. But here's the thing about humans. We learn through play. Neural interfaces are not toys, Zenith insisted. Everything's a toy if you're creative enough. Quinn replied, sliding into the pod. Back on Earth, I was a competitive gamer. 16 dimensions. That's just like managing cooldowns in stellar conflict universe at war, except with more existential implications. The makeshift interface hummed to life. Instead of fighting the quantum field, Quinn's consciousness flowed into it like water finding its level. Where the standard approach demanded simultaneous multidimensional awareness, Quinn's hack translated the experience into something a human brain could process, a complex but intuitive game interface. 3 hours later, Quinn emerged from the pod, sweating but triumphant. Dimensional navigation complete, Quinn announced. All 16 axes successfully mapped and navigated. The lab fell silent. Drakthar's scales had turned a pale, sickly yellow. Professor Zenith's form expanded and contracted rapidly, the geometric equivalent of hyperventilation. Impossible. The quantum field monitoring system must be malfunctioning. It's not, Quinn said, removing the ridiculous headgear. I just changed how I interacted with it. Instead of trying to perceive 16 dimensions simultaneously, I created a system that translates them into patterns my brain already understands. Meepo, who had been watching through the lab window, burst inside. Quinn, Dean Krasil is coming with the entire faculty. Someone reported unauthorized modifications to academy equipment. On cue, the lab doors hissed open. Dean Krasil floated in, his blue skin nearly purple with indignation, tentacles writhing in academic outrage. What is the meaning of this? He demanded, eye stalks swiveling between Quinn and the modified pod. Professor Zenith's shapes arranged themselves formally. The human has achieved dimensional navigation across all 16 axes. In 3 days, Quinn added, unable to resist. Preposterous, Krasil sneered. No species has ever, the monitoring systems confirm it. Zenith interrupted, bringing up the quantum field records. The human has developed a novel interface methodology that appears to circumvent conventional neural requirements. It's just like mapping video game controls, Quinn explained. You don't need to understand the underlying code to play the game. You just need an interface that makes sense to your brain. Meepo bounced excitedly. It's brilliant. Instead of forcing human neural architecture to adapt to the quantum field, Quinn adapted the quantum field to human neural architecture. This is unprecedented, Krasil muttered, his tentacles twitching nervously, and deeply concerning. Why? Quinn challenged. Because it means humans might actually have something to contribute to galactic society. Because, Krasil replied ominously, It means we may have severely underestimated how quickly your species can adapt, and that frankly terrifies us. Emergency faculty meeting concluded. Dean Krasil announced the next morning, his tentacles arranged in what Quinn had come to recognize as his Smegist configuration. In light of your unorthodox progress, the Academy has decided to accelerate your evaluation timeline. Quinn glanced at Meepo, who was nervously grooming his fur. Accelerate to when exactly? Now Professor Zenith's geometric shapes pulsed with what might have been anticipation. The Council has authorized an immediate practical examination. Drakthor's scales rippled with barely contained glee. Such a shame, just when the human was making progress. The examination chamber made the training lab look primitive by comparison. A massive quantum simulator occupied the center, a crystalline pod surrounded by swirling equations that seemed to bend light itself. Faculty members filled the observation gallery, many having canceled their own classes to witness what they assumed would be a spectacular human failure. The test is simple, Dean Krasil explained, not bothering to hide his satisfaction. Navigate a quantum vessel through the Mobius Nebula, a region with fluctuating dimensional instabilities. Advanced students typically attempt this simulation after their 5th year. And how long do I have to prepare? Quinn asked. Preparation time. Krasil's eye stalks blinked in mock confusion. Oh dear, there must have been a miscommunication. The test begins immediately. Quinn's makeshift neural interface had been confiscated as unauthorized technology, leaving only the standard Academy equipment designed for species with millions of years of evolutionary advantages in multidimensional thinking. Good luck, Quinn, Meepo squeaked. Remember, humans are good at, what was it again? Breaking things, Quinn replied, settling into the pod with determined calm, and then fixing them differently. The simulation engulfed Quinn instantly, consciousness expanding into the quantum field with disorienting force. The nebula unfolded like a living origami of cosmic proportions, 16-dimensional space folding and unfolding in patterns that made Quinn's brain scream in protest. Subject neural patterns destabilizing, announced the monitoring AI. Cognitive collapse imminent. Drakthor hissed in satisfaction. 17 seconds, not even their personal best. But then something changed. Quinn's neural signature stopped deteriorating and instead began reconfiguring. Where the standard approach demanded simultaneous awareness across all dimensions, Quinn was rapidly switching focus, like a juggler keeping multiple objects in the air. What's happening? Krasil demanded, his color shifting to alarmed purple. Professor Zenith's shapes contracted in surprise. The human is chunking. They're what? Krasil's tentacles writhed in confusion. It's a human cognitive strategy, explained Meepo, who had been studying Quinn's species. Instead of processing all information simultaneously, they group complex patterns into manageable units they can rapidly cycle between. Inside the quantum field, Quinn was doing exactly that, treating 16-dimensional navigation like switching between different game screens, maintaining awareness of each just long enough before cycling to the next. Not elegant, not efficient, but uniquely human, and it was working. Then the simulation shifted dramatically. Warning, unexpected dimensional rift detected in the simulation parameters, the AI announced clinically. Professor Zenith's form rippled in alarm. That's not part of the standard test protocol. All eyes turned to Drakthor, whose scales had darkened to guilty crimson. The human was cheating, he hissed defensively. I merely balanced the scales. The sabotaged simulation was now generating actual dimensional instabilities that threatened to collapse not just Quinn's consciousness but potentially damage the Academy's entire neural network. Abort the simulation, Krasil ordered frantically. System locked, replied the AI. External override rejected. Inside the quantum field, Quinn felt the simulation boundaries dissolving. This was no longer a test, it was becoming a genuine dimensional crisis. The human's consciousness was being pulled apart across realities that shouldn't be able to intersect. They'll be brain dead in minutes. Professor Zenith's shapes had collapsed into a worried jumble, but Quinn wasn't panicking. Instead, there was a curious calm as the human's mind adapted yet again. If traditional approaches wouldn't work, then it was time for some proper human improvisation. Quinn stopped fighting the dimensional rifts and instead began using them, surfing the chaos like a quantum wave, letting instinct replace calculation. Where advanced species relied on mathematical precision, Quinn deployed an unpredictable randomness that somehow worked. Impossible, whispered Krasil as the monitoring displays showed Quinn not only surviving but stabilizing the simulation. They're using chaos theory to navigate quantum space. No, Professor Zenith corrected, shapes reorganizing in dawning realization. They're using play. The human is treating dimensional navigation as a game. The simulation stabilized completely as Quinn guided the quantum vessel through the nebula, emerging on the other side with what the monitoring systems indicated was the highest efficiency rating ever recorded. When Quinn finally emerged from the pod, there was stunned silence in the examination chamber. "So," Quinn asked, wiping sweat from their brow, "did I pass?" Dean Crazill's color had faded to a pale, defeated blue. "The Council will need to be informed of these developments." "You mean that humans might actually be useful members of galactic society?" Quinn suggested. "I mean," Crazill replied gravely, "that we may have severely underestimated how dangerous your species truly is. No race should be able to adapt that quickly to technology they don't understand." Professor Zenith's form shifted thoughtfully. "Or perhaps we've been approaching advancement too rigidly. The humans' methods were unorthodox but effective." "Unorthodox?" Drakthor spat, scales flashing angrily. "They destroyed centuries of established quantum theory." "No," Meepo interjected, bouncing excitedly. "They just played with it instead of worshipping it." As faculty arguments erupted throughout the chamber, Quinn stood quietly in the center, a small smile playing at the corners of their mouth. The Galactic Confederation had standards, high, precise, excessive standards. But perhaps what the galaxy really needed wasn't another species that followed the rules perfectly. Perhaps what it needed was a species that knew when to break them. The Academy's Grand Council chamber had never hosted an emergency session for a single student before, certainly not for a human one. Yet here they were, 14 of the galaxy's most distinguished academics, debating what to do about Quinn Novak. "The data is unambiguous," announced Professor Vex 4, her chrome chassis gleaming under the chamber's crystalline lights. "The human's method of quantum neural navigation, while theoretically unsound, produced results 17.3% more efficient than our current top graduates. Through unregulated, unsafe techniques," countered Dean Crazill, his blue skin flushed indigo with residual indignation. "We cannot validate methods that violate established cognitive protocols." Quinn stood before them, hands casually tucked into pockets, looking far more relaxed than any being should when facing the collected intelligence of multiple galaxies. "With respect, Dean," Quinn said, "your established protocols were designed by and for species that perceive reality in ways humans simply don't. We're not telepathic, we don't have external neural nodes, and we can't naturally perceive multiple dimensions. But we can adapt." "That's precisely what concerns us," replied one council member, a sentient cloud of intelligent gas contained in an anti-gravity field. "Your species shouldn't be capable of this level of adaptation. It defies evolutionary models." Meepo bounced forward, having been granted special permission to attend as Quinn's cultural interpreter. "Actually, it perfectly matches Earth's evolutionary history. Humans evolved as persistence predators who survived by adapting quickly to environmental challenges, rather than through specialized biological advantages." Professor Zenith's geometric shapes arranged themselves into what Quinn had come to recognize as their contemplative configuration. "The human approach to quantum navigation suggests possibilities we've never explored. Their methods are inelegant, yet remarkably effective." "Inelegant?" Quinn grinned. "We call that pragmatic." A quiet chuckle rippled through several council members. "The real question," said a crystalline entity near the back, "is what this means for humanity's place in the Confederation. If one human can master in days what takes other species years, then perhaps," finished Quinn, "humans aren't quite as primitive as you thought." Drakthor, who had been required to attend as part of his disciplinary tuition for sabotaging the exam, hissed softly. "You got lucky, human. One success doesn't elevate your entire species." "No," Quinn agreed, surprisingly. "It doesn't. But it does suggest we deserve a fair chance to contribute." The council called for deliberation, leaving Quinn and Meepo waiting outside the chamber for what felt like eons but was actually just under an hour, according to the Academy's hexadecimal time system. When they returned, Dean Crazill looked like he'd swallowed something particularly disagreeable. "The council has reached a decision," he announced, tentacles twitching with barely contained frustration. "Quinn Novak has demonstrated sufficient aptitude to qualify for continued enrollment at the Academy. Additionally," he paused, clearly struggling with the next words, "the council has authorized the admission of 5 additional human candidates for the next academic cycle." Quinn couldn't help the grin that spread across their face. "I appreciate the council's wisdom." "Don't push it, human," Crazill muttered. "This doesn't mean we like you." "Of course not," Quinn replied cheerfully. "You just find us useful." As they left the chamber, Meepo bouncing excitedly at Quinn's side, Professor Zenith's geometric form appeared beside them. "Your unorthodox methods have caused quite the paradigm shift," the professor said. Several faculty members are already exploring adaptations of your approach. Happy to contribute to the advancement of galactic knowledge, Quinn replied. There's something else you should know, Zenith added, shapes pulsing slowly. Many species in the Confederation have been watching Earth for millennia, waiting for you to develop sufficient technology for contact. What most of them feared wasn't your violence or your primitiveness. What was it then? Your adaptability. Zenith's shapes contracted slightly. Most species take thousands of years to incorporate new technologies. Humans do it in generations. You invented powered flight, and then walked on your moon less than 70 years later. That kind of rapid adaptation terrifies stable civilizations. Quinn considered this. So it's not that you thought we were too stupid to join you. It's that many suspected you might be too dangerous to invite in, Zenith confirmed. Your success here hasn't entirely dispelled that concern. Back in their dormitory, Quinn began packing up the makeshift neural interface components that had been returned after the hearing. Meepo watched, hanging upside down from his ceiling perch. What will you do now, Quinn? The furry alien asked. You've still got almost the entire semester before the next human candidates arrive. Quinn smiled, holding up a component that glowed with possibilities. I think I'll see what other impossible courses this place offers. After all, I've got an entire species' reputation to uphold. You know, Meepo observed thoughtfully, for creatures with such limited natural abilities, you humans are remarkably hard to stop once you set your minds to something. That, Quinn replied, is probably the nicest thing anyone said about humanity in this entire galaxy. As Quinn gazed out the window at the cosmos beyond, the message being prepared for Earth carried more than just news of academic success. It carried the first real human foothold among the stars, not earned through advanced technology or evolutionary advantages, but through that uniquely human quality of turning limitations into innovations. The Galactic Confederation had standards, impossibly high standards, but as they were quickly learning, humans had something better, the stubborn refusal to accept that anything was truly impossible. Earth's integration into galactic society wouldn't be easy or smooth, but after Quinn's success, it was finally, undeniably, underway, and the galaxy would never be quite the same again.